now entering the horror sanctum.
Hello and welcome back to the Horror Sanctum. I'm Jay with John, Kellen, and TJ, and we are excited to be joined today by local horror host Dr. Gangrene. Doctor, thank you and welcome to the Sanctum.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for the invitation to join the Sanctum. The only thing better would be a horror sanitarium.
Hey, we'll get there. We'll get there. So we asked the good doctor to pick a flick that he loves for us to talk about, and he landed on what most believe to be the greatest anthology film of all time. Most people, not everyone, right, Kellen? And that would be 1982's Creepshow.
Yes, so Creepshow, 1982, George Romero's Creepshow. One of my favorite George Romero films, probably right up there with the Dead trilogy. It's probably right after that for me. George Romero, surprisingly, a director that's so underrated, and even some of his kind of offbeat, wilder stuff that doesn't even really fit the genre of horror necessarily is actually still pretty decent stuff. I mean, if you go through, like I did one time, his whole filmography, he doesn't really have a terrible film, unless you count Survival of the Dead. It's not really great. But aside from that, I mean, he was near the end of his career. We'll give him that. But Creepshow, is probably single-handedly the film that brought back horror anthologies into the mainstream and kind of really revived a whole series of them that come out in the 80s into the early 90s. They had kind of waned with the Amicus. Amicus in the 60s really brought them back in 1965 with the one that Doc's representing, my personal favorite, Dr. Terror's House of Horrors. In 1965, Amicus was a very, very small group in Britain that founded to basically compete with Hammer, which was the big British horror production house that made all the remakes basically of the Universal horror films. We did on one of our episodes, The Horror of Dracula, the first Christopher Lee Dracula. And they realized this format, that they weren't the originators of the format. I think the first horror anthology I'm aware of is Dead of Night from 1941, which is actually still one of the best ones and has one of the original creepy dummy doll that comes to life kind of segment.
There's one called Waxwork from like the 1920s.
Oh, that's true. I forgot about that one.
I don't know when Qui-Gon was either. That's pretty early.
Oh, Qui-Gon. That's like 1960, 61. Yeah. Was that a Kurosawa? That wasn't Kurosawa. It was his era though.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a good Criterion release. I used to have that DVD. But yeah, it's they definitely brought him out, but it was more of a function of budget, that what they found with the Amicus, because Amicus probably made a dozen or more of these, and each of them found an audience. But what they found was they could make them on the cheap. You could film a segment in like a week, and you could have a film done in 2 or 3 weeks, and then put it out, and you could actually film them all at the same time using different directors and just kind of compartmentalize the stories, do 15, 20-minute segments, piece them together. And now, there's nothing new under the sun. Now all these independent horror labels are doing very similar things with like 1031 series, different things like that harken back to the days of, Tales from the Crypt and EC Comics, all that stuff that really Creepshow is a love letter to. Creepshow is basically the love letter to EC Comics, the Vault of Horror, Tales from the Crypt, all of those great old comics that before the comic code come in and said, that's too violent, well, we gotta burn these and get rid of these, can't make these anymore. That was the thing that inspired a whole generation, and that would have been the generation that George Romero and his contemporaries were coming up with and loved so much, so that when they got an opportunity to kind of revive this anthology genre, they were able to pull together an amazing ensemble cast, all-star cast of the 80s. You got, Hal Holbrook, Leslie Nielsen, you got Ted Danson, it was like the perfect storm of, and then getting Tom Savini to work on the special effects. It was kind of the perfect storm to be just that perfect horror anthology of the 80s. Now, we're not talking about the sequels. Sequels are, in my estimation, are diminishing returns for sure. But this one will always be the classic. Doc, you're in the Sanctum. What say you on the classic Creepshow?
Yeah, it's not only my favorite anthology film, it's my favorite movie, period, probably.
Oh, wow.
A lot of times, if you put me under the gun, that's what I'll say. If I don't say, well, it depends on my mood that day. If I don't say anything by Vincent Price, okay,
Fair.
this is the next best. But no, it really is, and I do love it. I think to me, it's just a pitch perfect movie. I rewatched it again last night. It just brings me so much joy. It's one of my favorite theatrical experiences too, was seeing it in the theater when I really wasn't supposed to go. My parents had said, no, you can't go see that. And so then my real dad took me and my brother to go see it and snuck us in. And of course, it blew my little mind. I was just like, oh my God, this is so cool, yeah, I mean, I just think every segment is solid. I don't think that, I hear people say that that it's an uneven movie, and I don't think it is. To me, every single segment works for me, and I get that it's a subjective thing. Some people like things more than others. I get it, but for me, every one of them works. Every one is perfect. I love the humor. It's a perfect representation of EC Comics. They get what so many of the modern day anthology guys don't get, and that is, you've got to have that sense of comeuppance. Your bad guys have to get what's coming to them in the end, and that's what made the EC Comics work so much. That shambling corpse coming back from the dead to get revenge, that's the formula right there. I guess it's a little different with the Jordy Verrill story, but that's your comic relief of the movie. And I think Stephen King does a good job in his acting. I know he said that he kind of resented Romero a little bit for making him go so big and over the top, but that's what makes it so good. He's ridiculous and it's fun.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, to me, it's just a lot of fun. Let's put it this way. I think it's the best modern anthology movie, and I classify modern as post 1980. So
I would agree with that.
Yeah, so pre-80, you still get all those 70s Amicus anthologies like, Tales from the Crypt and Vault of Horror and, From Beyond the Grave, all that stuff, which is great. I don't think any studio made them better than Amicus.
Yeah, agreed.
But then, yeah, it's a solid movie in my opinion.
I agree too.
My favorite Romero movie, if you pin me down, even though I say it's my favorite movie of all time, if you ask me what my favorite Romero movie is, I have to give so much respect to Night of the Living Dead that I would just, on sheer historical bias, lean that way. But I think Creepshow in some ways is a more entertaining watch.
Yeah, well, Night of the Living Dead totally created probably the most popular subgenre of the last 20 years.
Yeah, and I think Stephen King being over the top is what made it for me. That whole segment, like, he was just so ridiculous, and by the time we get around to watching it, like my age, it's like we know who Stephen King is. He's established in our lives, and that's not how we see Stephen King, and that's what made it enjoyable for me. I can kind of see the flow issues to a degree. I think that the fluffy one is maybe a tad slow, a little too long. I rewatched it today it's probably 6th or 7th time I've ever watched it. but it didn't take anything away from me. It's one of my top 5 anthology films, if not number 1. Like we were talking earlier, like I'm a big fan of body bags. Like I love body bags.
Yeah.
You know, that's only 3 stories, and I can appreciate that being simple. There's one, December. I don't know if you guys have seen that.
December.
It's like 30. It's like 20.
I've heard
to
of
30
it.
little episodes. That's insane. That's too much. This one kind of hits the sweet spot. I wish it was a little bit shorter, like maybe hour 45. That's really my only critique of it. But I love all the scenes, and I honestly think about Ed Harris's dancing probably once a week. It just pops into my head. He just pops in there dancing.
You know,
Absolutely love
somewhere
that
in a perfect world, he's dancing with Crispin Glover from
Yes.
Friday 4.
Yes, that would be fantastic. But yeah, I'm glad you picked this one because I've been looking for an excuse to watch it again anyways. I'm going to watch Creepshow 2 tomorrow. While it's not quite the same, I do still enjoy that one quite a bit. So let's go over to John.
Yeah, Creepshow. I grew up watching this on TV. First thing for me, being a 90s kid, it was Encore. Encore was like how I learned so many great 70s, 80s movies, 90s movies. Night of the Comet, 3 O'Clock High, Creepshow, like just all the odd cult type films. I didn't know this was Romero, though, actually, initially. And I think it's just because in my mind, as a kid, I didn't associate Romero with other films outside of the Dead trilogy, right? And later on, more than a trilogy. But love George Romero, love all of his films. I would say that even films like Bruiser, kind of an underrated movie from 2000, kind of an odd film, but really sort of very underrated in what it's trying to say in the film. Martin, I love Martin. Just recently watched it like maybe 5 or 6 months ago. Love the music in this film. John Harrison does such a good job. The music is kind of the first thing that stood out to me as a kid. Of course, it was used also in the trailer for Thanksgiving by Eli Roth, which is actually gonna be a real movie, which is the weirdest thing, right? They're finally doing it. Love it. And, as a kid, I was such a Naked Gun fan. The first thing that threw me off about this movie was Leslie Nielsen as a villain in Something to Tide You Over. I just was like, that was so weird. And then Ted Danson is this sleazy guy. I mean, he's not really a villain, but he's kind of sleazy, as well. So it's like you've got Cheers, you've got Naked Gun, and it's like this weird thing. And that was the first time as a kid that I think I understood that, okay, these people are actors, right? They're not just playing a character always. Although the funny thing about Leslie Nielsen in this movie is I just read earlier, I didn't know this, that apparently on the set of the film, he walked around with like a fart machine and he would randomly play the fart machine before he would start his takes.
There's actually a clip of him, and I think it's on maybe Conan, early Conan days, and it was a little squeeze box that he always carried in his pocket, and he would just every now and then, just at random.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
What
Said
noise
somebody gave it to him, huh?
What noise was that again?
That's got to be a real. That's got to be a real. But like, and another thing, Galen Ross, she plays Becky in the film, which is the drowning victim in Something to Tide You Over, the wife and the person having the affair with Ted Danson. She was only in 3 movies. She was in this, she was in Dawn of the Dead, and she was in one of my favorites, Madman, which is a very underrated, like 80s Friday the 13th, The Burning type of camp type film. So it's kind of interesting to see her in this in such a small role. But yeah, I love this movie. I think it's great. My favorite segments are Something to Tide You Over and probably The Crate. I just love The Crate. I'm a big Adrienne Barbeau fan. I've always loved her and all the Carpenter films. She's always just a great actress. And just her playing that kind of insufferable spouse. I mean, and when Fluffy finally gets her, it's just like, it's awesome, right? So yeah, I love Creepshow. It's I don't know what else to say about it. It's a great film.
She's fantastic in everything. I don't know if you guys ever watched C Lab 2021, but I think it's episode 1 or 2 where they reference her and they're putting their brains in robot bodies, and Murphy wants to put his in an Adrian Barbobot.
That's awesome.
Fantastic. He's perfect. She's going to be at Scarefest, so I'm saving money for that already.
Nice.
She's great.
Cool.
It looks great. I got to do a Q&A with her over at Lone Wolf before we showed this movie, or actually it was after this movie, and did a Q&A with her. She's fantastic.
Oh, awesome.
Yes. So we're going to go down the corridor and go into the disappointments room, and we're going to go over to Kellen.
Oh, well, time to bring the mood down. So yeah, I watched this for the first time. Big shock to everyone in the group or anybody that's paid attention to anything related to me in horror. Watched this for the first time yesterday and just could not get into it. And I wanted to so bad. It had all the things that I should have loved. It did have that kind of Tales from the Crypt feel, the pacing and music kind of the B movies of that time, where it was, that, I don't know, almost music box kind of, soundtrack. I just couldn't get into it. I don't know if it was because the humor was so goofy. I mean, especially Stephen King, in his part being so over the top, kind of pulls you out of it. The horror in it seemed more just because, instead of to be terrifying or creepy or scary. Like, there wasn't a moment. There was two segments, the Something to Tide You Over and They're Creeping Up on You, that did have moments where it was kind of, they built on the suspense. It kind of was terrifying, especially, the bugs creeping out, which is obviously they're doing a play on kind of the Howard Hughes kind of ideology. But I just could not get into this film. I found myself laughing at the absurdity instead of laughing at the jokes. And, again, it kind of surprised me growing up every Saturday night, watching Mad TV and then Tales from the Crypt. That was me and my cousin's thing every Saturday at my grandmother's house when she was in the bed and couldn't tell what we were watching, or she was in the kitchen just getting everything ready for Sunday dinner the next morning. That's what we did, and that's where my basis for my love of horror comes from. So watching this, it was almost disappointing for me not to be able to get into it, especially with the quality of the actors. I mean, Ed Harris, Hal Holbrook, Leslie Nielsen, Ted Danson, Stephen King, Joe Hill as his son, who wrote Black Phone, which I thought was a really good movie, a really good adaptation. It just didn't get me there in the way that I thought it would. I don't know how else to say it. And I get its place in the horror genre. I get the importance of it, especially considering it has these big name actors who were willing to step in and be kind of silly, get kind of outside of the serious roles or the comedic roles that they were normally used to. Because all that considered, the biggest comedic actor in the movie played the most serious role. Leslie Nielsen's character his jokes were not jokes. I mean, he was having fun himself, but the fun wasn't for the camera. So, his interactions with Ted Danson, to his credit, were very creepy. You see him in Naked Gun, and the roles that he played in other movies, where he's just kind of over the top, walking around with the fart box. He's just a joke guy. And then you see him in this role being a sociopath, basically. It was kind of jarring. I mean, he did an incredible job of playing evil. Like, at one moment, there was a look on his face, and I was like, he looks like he could be a bastard. So it has its moments, but overall, it didn't do it for me. I could not get into this film. I tried, as much as I wanted to.
I've got a question for you, Kellen, because I'm genuinely curious, because there's so many of these films that you kind of come to later already knowing kind of the legacy of it, right? That it's a classic for whatever reason. Do you think that makes it harder to appreciate it for what it is?
No, because I go into the movies like this with zero expectations. Like, you see the pictures from it, you get the feel immediately because it is an 80s movie, so you're automatically drawn into that 80s style of cinema. Every decade had it. You can almost close your eyes sometimes just to the soundtrack. Oh, this is 60s, this is 50s, this is 70s, this is 90s. Especially because the 90s relied heavily on pop music. So it's real easy to pick that out. But the 80s had their same feel. Like I said, that music box sound that Tales from the Crypt drew on, that this drew on, that what is it? Puppet Master drew on heavily. So I go in knowing what it is, but not with any expectations. I'm not going in thinking I'm ready to be entertained. I'm going in thinking, all right, let's see if this entertains me. And it never reached that point where I was like, okay, I'm in. Like, we watched Trolls 2, and it was probably 10 minutes into that movie, and I was hooked. I was like, okay, this is awful, and I'm here for it. This to me was just awful.
No one would describe it as awful. Like, I'll give you a pass for not liking it because there's movies out there that I should like. Prime example, we've discussed Drag Me to Hell. I watched it start to finish for the first time this week, and I love Sam Raimi, and I don't care for that movie. I should, by all accounts, I should love that film, and I don't. I don't know why. I can't explain it. But there are films out there that you should like and you don't. So we'll give you a pass this time. But there's other movies that we will not give you a pass on for sure. I won't name any yet. We're going to do an episode eventually where we just name the top 25 horror movies of all time, and we're going to see if Kellen has seen them, and then we're going to berate him relentlessly the entire episode. That could
be a continuing series.
Good, because there's a lot of classics that I've yet to see.
So even though you didn't like it, what would you say was your favorite segment of the film?
I kind of go between the two that I mentioned. I liked the simplicity of their creeping up on you. It's basically him, you see the mouth of the guy talking to him through the video peephole or whatever, and the voice is talking to him over the intercom. But it's mainly just him slowly descending into madness. So I did enjoy that one. I thought that was done really well. The progression of it was good. And then I liked the Something to Tide You Over. Like I said, it played really well. I didn't like how it ended. I felt like that got a little cheesy. I think it should have ended with Ted Danson, because that's a beautiful. I would love to have that as a poster. As creepy or subversive as that may sound, having him underwater with the hair and the bubbles coming up and the sun behind him, I thought that was such a beautiful visual of his impending death. I would love to have that as a poster. So that visual in and of itself made that whole scene. And then just seeing two actors who are more known for comedic roles play serious and play well. So it would probably be a toss-up between those two. But if I had to pick, I would probably pick Something to Tide You Over, just because huge Ted Danson fan. And then just to see Leslie Nielsen play evil so well.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best one overall. My favorite's the Stephen King one. I just love that one so much. Like every part of it, I adore. John, I think you said it's tied your favorite.
Yeah, that probably that or The Crate. It's a tie between those two. I just think those are both awesome segments.
Yeah, Doctor, which one was your favorite segment of them?
When I was a kid, I always leaned towards The Crate, but I think Something to Tide You Over has become my favorite over time. Just something about it. It's a more adult, a little bit more adult story. You got a cheating spouse. You've got the love triangle there, and Leslie Nelson is so evil in it. He just revels doing these just absolutely horrible things, burying this guy up to his neck so he drowns in the ocean. It's so just
while he watches the woman drown on a TV in front of him. That's the definition of evil.
It's like a Saw movie before there was Saw.
And there's an alternate ending to that too that was written. It's
really?
Yeah. So the alternate ending basically was that the cops come, he shows them footage, but the footage is just him killing them. Basically, it doesn't show them coming back. And he goes to the gas chamber, and he's in the gas chamber and the smoke's coming in, and he does the whole like, I can hold my breath for a long time. Like that was what they wrote, and then they changed it.
I think that would have been better.
That feels
for
very
me.
Tales of the Crypt to me. That sounds like the Tales from the Crypt episode, 100%.
Well,
Oh,
I
yeah.
absolutely love the makeup on the waterlogged dead coming back to kill him. I think it's wonderful. And Kaylin hit on something that's really big in this movie, and that's the cinematography, just the look of it. There's so many gorgeous shots in this. Michael Gornick is the DP in this, who would go on to direct Creepshow 2, of course. And he just absolutely kills it with this movie. And somebody mentioned the music too. I think it was Jade mentioned the music. It is one of my very favorite soundtracks. I bought it as soon as Waxwork put it out. I bought that vinyl for the soundtrack because I've always wanted to get that soundtrack. It's so iconic. I pick it up all the time. Anytime someone uses it in something, like you mentioned, I've heard it in 2 or 3 places, and it's just pick up on it immediately what it is. It's John Harrison. John Harrison would go on to direct
Tales from the Dark Side movie.
The movie, which is pretty cool. I just love that whole Pittsburgh crew of filmmakers up there.
It's like a family.
It really is. There's a little movie called, I think it's called Special Effect or something like that.
That was John Harrison's first project.
And there's just something about that little crew of filmmakers. I even watched Bill Heinzman's zombie
Flesh Eater
the other day. It's not a great movie by any stretch of the movie, but it's got something about a certain quality about it. It makes it watchable and enjoyable on a different level. You're sitting there going, this is not a good movie, but there's something enjoyable about parts of it. The parts that aren't complete remakes of Night of the Living Dead were kind of enjoyable. But
and to think that Mr. Rogers gave them all their start.
Right. That's weird.
Wow. Thanks,
TJ,
Fred.
what was your favorite segment of the flick?
Man, I mean, I'll have to echo a lot of what you guys say. In part is, something that tied you over is probably technically the best. However, as a young kid, and someone who loves zombies and the Romero zombie films from a young age, Father's Day has the most nostalgia for me. And that's still probably overall my favorite because it was my favorite as a kid. And I watched this a lot as a kid. Even though I think technically the better story, the better acted thing is something to tide you over. However, I will say what I think is the most terrifying, because I hate roaches, is the something to creep up on you, or they're creeping up on you segment.
I was thinking when we were watching that episode last night that they could have stopped with the shot of the old man dead inside that sealed off room, because they did this wide shot of his body pitched back, and then they said, no, we're going all the way with it. And then
Nice.
God bless him. God bless him.
I was thinking to myself, if they had made this movie in the 70s or 60s, that's what they would have done. They would have just stopped there, and it would have worked completely.
Yeah, and then cut to a dummy, and no, they showed the whole money shot, the whole deal.
And that's what really blew my mind about this movie. You get things like, man, this shambling corpse ripped off somebody's head and serves it like a birthday cake on a platter. Cockroaches flooding out of the corpse of a dead person. A monster in a crate that rips these people apart. I mean, it's
all Tom Savini.
Yeah, good old Tom.
And something else you said though, Doc, about the cinematography. The thing I like about this movie, one of my favorite things about it is, I think more than any other horror anthology, it kind of created with some of their lighting effects and the way they framed backgrounds and stuff. They basically shot for shot recreated some panels from the old EC comics with the way they'd have like our our logo for our show has kind of that hypnotic kind of thing. You have some of those similar effects in the backgrounds and some of the weird like green lighting and stuff on some of the scenes and the reaction shots to make it look like a comic book panel like DC Comics. And that's something I don't think any of the other really good horror anthologies that are based in these comics or the spirit of these comics at least have really been able to pull off since.
Well, and they lit it so heavily with the reds and blues and the transitions between segments with the pages turning and the comic book panels. I've seen other movies try to do that. Well, the Creepshow TV series kind of tried. It just misses the tone of the movie. It's its own thing. It misses the tone of the movie completely, and it's okay. You know, it's all right.
It's just cheaper too. That's the biggest problem with the show.
It is, but
and they lean more into the comedy more than just kind of the dark, the dark sensibility that is tongue in cheek.
Yeah,
I love the show. Like I loved the Creepshow.
I like it too
on Shudder. I liked it a lot. So before we get to our ratings, TJ, you said like the nostalgia part is Father's Day. I'm the same way. That and the Stephen King part are nostalgic for me, but I think that's because that's about how far I could get before someone realized I was watching something I wasn't supposed to as a kid and then turned it off. So that's like the stuff that's vivid in my mind for sure. So we'll go around and do our rankings, then we'll close up shop. I thought about it. I went back and forth. I think I'm going to stick with 4 for myself, 4 out of 5. John?
Probably 4.5 out of 5. Just because I just think, I mean,
you and Kellen flip-flop this episode.
I just think, I know it's like this movie, I don't watch it all the time, but end to end, it really is kind of perfect. It's one of the earlier comic films in a way, if you want to look at it that way. I mean, it's brilliant. It's often forgotten that it's a George Romero film, but it's one of his best. So yeah, 4.5 out of 5 for sure.
Fair. Doctor?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the same way. I mean, on an enjoyment scale, it's like, am I rating for quality or am I rating for how much favorite? Like, there's a difference between
overall.
But overall, I'll just give it a 5. I'll go ahead and give it a 5.
That's fair. TJ?
Well, one question for Doc. Is that original Creepshow? We just kind of see it in the upper corner of your background.
That is, yeah. I have all my posters.
Yeah,
Nice.
That's a beauty.
Yeah, I have a I have a lot of anthology posters. That's my favorite subgenre. So yeah,
it's one of mine too. And because it's one of mine, and this is one of the best, I have to give a 4.5. I still reserve that 5. I've only ever given John Carpenter's Halloween a 5 to this point. That's my
too.
No. Shut your mouth.
All right, so that's it for the rankings.
What?
So we'll go. Oh, wait. I'm sorry, Kellen. What did you give it?
No, you should skip me. I don't want to ruin the grading
curve. Grading on a curve is just going to screw all the numbers up.
2.5.
Oh.
3.5.
2.5.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
Blasphemy.
Jesus.
Well, on the 5 scale, I think a 3 would be an average movie. So that's a little.
That's a 6. Yeah, that's not bad.
2.5 is 50%.
Yeah, 50%. Yeah, average.
It got a 65% on Rotten Tomatoes, so I'm not far off.
What'd you give it, Doc?
I went ahead and went with 5 just because it's my favorite movie, and I wanted to course correct for Kellen.
Fair.
So that brings it to a 4.1. So that brings it to a 4. That's fair. Even though someone knocked that number down that wasn't John this time.
Pretty fair. Come on.
All right. So that's going to do it for this episode. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and to wherever you're listening to this podcast now. And follow us over on Instagram. We post every day. My OCD makes me go photo, reel. So you'll get a reel tomorrow. We're currently doing the Troll 2 episode, and I have like 6 reels. So we'll be doubling up on these because there's just so much quality content from Troll 2 and from George Hardy. And remember, starting July 19th, which is in 2 days, we're going on Tingler Television.
A month?
This episode's coming out the week of. Thanks, Kellen. Jesus Christ.
Shame.
I'm just happy to
July
be here.
19th. July 19th. You can catch us on Tingular Television at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time, which is on Roku. So be sure to do that. Thanks to Dr. Gangrene.
Doc's got a Roku channel too. You want to plug that?
Yeah.
Doc?
So go ahead, Doc. Tell everybody where they can find you, what you do, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I host horror movies. Comes on Nashville's NECAT station in Nashville. Obviously Nashville. So it airs there Saturday nights at 9 p.m. Central in the Nashville market. They have a Roku channel that's a live stream of their station. So just look up NECAT, NECAT, and you can watch it there. Or you can find them on my website, drgangrene.com. You can watch there.
Awesome. So go check all that out. Subscribe to his channels. Watch that. It's good stuff. We really appreciate you coming on. It was great. So that's going to do it. Signing off. I'm Jay with Dr. Gangrene, John, Kellen, and TJ. And until next time,
keep it spooky.